Today, we are looking at love, dating, and marriage through a game theory lens. Not because romance is cold or mechanical, but because game theory gives us a language for incentives, uncertainty, signaling, risk, commitment, and strategy. And if there's one thing that seems clear about modern relationships, especially among Gen Z, it is that love is not just a feeling. It is also a decision made inside a crowded marketplace of options, expectations, fears, and social signals.
Exactly. Game theory does not mean people are plotting against each other like chess players. It means people are constantly asking, sometimes consciously, and sometimes unconsciously, what is the best move, given what I think the other person might do? In dating, that question shows up everywhere. Should I text first? Should I be emotionally available? Should I define the relationship? Should I keep my options open? Should I commit now, later, or not at all?
And Gen Z appears to be handling those questions in a very distinct way. The mindset is often cautious, analytical, and highly aware of downside risk. Love is still desired, but the route to love is filtered through questions of safety, identity, emotional labor, financial pressure, social judgment, and personal freedom. If older generations often treated marriage as a central milestone, Gen Z may be more likely to treat it as one possible outcome that must justify itself.
That is a key shift. In older models, the game was often more structured. People met through school, work, religious communities, neighborhoods, family networks, or local social circles. The available choices could be limited, and that limitation created pressure, but it also created clarity. The dating pool was smaller, reputational consequences were more immediate, and marriage was often seen as a default step into adulthood.
Gen Z enters a different strategic environment. The game board is bigger, but also more confusing. Digital platforms can create the feeling of endless choice. Social media can make relationships more visible, more comparable, and more performative. A person is not only deciding whether they like someone, they are also reading cues, checking consistency, evaluating online identity, and wondering whether the other person is presenting a real self or a curated version.
That creates what game theorists would call an information problem. Dating depends on trust, but trust requires reliable information. If everyone can edit their image, delay replies, keep multiple conversations open, or signal interest without commitment, then the cost of misreading someone rises. Gen Z may respond by becoming more guarded. The logic is simple. If I reveal too much too early, and the other person is not serious, I lose emotional leverage.
So vulnerability becomes a strategic move. In an ideal romantic world, vulnerability would be freely exchanged. In a game theory world, vulnerability is risky because it can be exploited, ignored, screenshotted, mocked, or used to create imbalance. That does not mean Gen Z is incapable of deep love. It may mean many young people are trying to solve the trust problem before they allow themselves to fall fully.
One of the causes is the abundance of visible alternatives. When options seem endless, commitment can feel costly. In game theory, commitment means giving up other possible moves. For prior generations, giving up other moves may have felt natural because the alternatives were less visible or less accessible. For Gen Z, alternatives are constantly suggested by technology, culture, and social comparison. Even if someone wants a serious relationship, they may worry that committing too soon means missing a better match.
That is the paradox of choice inside romance. More options can sound empowering, but they can also make every decision feel provisional. If you believe there is always another person one swipe, message, or social connection away, then the incentive to work through early discomfort weakens. Small conflicts become exit points. Awkwardness becomes evidence. Boredom becomes a trigger. Instead of asking how to build with someone, the player may ask whether a better game is available elsewhere.
But it is not just abundance. Another cause is risk awareness. Gen Z is often described as highly fluent in the language of boundaries, mental health, toxicity, red flags, trauma, and emotional safety. Even without making sweeping claims about every individual, It is fair to say that these concepts shape many modern dating conversations. This can be healthy because people name harmful patterns earlier, but it can also create hypervigilance, where normal human imperfection is interpreted as a warning sign.
That is where triggers come in. A delayed reply can trigger anxiety about disinterest. A vague answer can trigger suspicion about hidden motives. A partner liking someone else's photo can trigger questions about loyalty. A request for space can trigger fear of abandonment. In game theory terms, each trigger becomes a signal, but signals are not always accurate. The problem is that modern dating often rewards fast interpretation before slow understanding.
And if people are afraid of being played, they may start playing defense. Defensive dating can look like emotional distance, ironic detachment, situationships, keeping labels vague, or refusing to be the one who cares more. The game becomes less about finding mutual commitment and more about avoiding humiliation. Nobody wants to be the player who cooperates while the other person defects.
That is the classic prisoner's dilemma applied to dating. If both people cooperate, they can build trust. If one person cooperates and the other defects, the vulnerable person gets hurt. If both defect, nobody gets deeply hurt, but nobody gets deeply loved either. Gen Z's challenge may be that many people want cooperation, but they do not trust the other person to cooperate first.
And that creates a culture of testing. People test response time. They test jealousy. They test seriousness. They test whether someone will post them, claim them, introduce them, plan dates, remember details, or stay consistent. In game theory, tests are attempts to gather information, but in relationships, too much testing can become a self-fulfilling problem. If you treat someone like a potential threat long enough, they may stop feeling like a partner.
I am tapping the table on this point because it matters. The real issue is not that Gen Z does not believe in love. The real issue is that many people may believe love is valuable but expensive. It costs time, attention, emotional risk, sexual trust, financial coordination, and identity compromise. Marriage, then, is not simply a romantic finish line. It becomes a long-term contract that must pass a cost-benefit test.
That is very different from prior generations, at least in the broad cultural model. Earlier generations often faced stronger social pressure to marry, stay married, and organize adult life around family formation. That pressure could create stability, but it could also trap people in unhealthy roles. Gen Z has inherited the lesson that commitment without choice can become confinement. So they tend to ask, does this relationship expand my life or reduce it?
Marriage in this frame becomes a cooperative long game. Game theory says repeated games are different from one-time games. If you know you will interact with someone again and again, cooperation becomes more valuable. Marriage is the ultimate repeated game. Bills, chores, family, intimacy, illness, ambition, disappointment, aging, and repair. The question is whether two people can create a pattern where cooperation is rewarded and betrayal is costly.
For Gen Z, the marriage question may be less about tradition and more about alignment. Do we share values? Do we respect each other's goals? Can we handle conflict? Are we financially realistic? Do we want the same lifestyle? Are we emotionally literate enough to repair damage? The wedding itself may matter less than the operating system of the relationship.
That word, operating system, is perfect. Prior generations may have relied more heavily on inherited scripts. The script told people what dating was for, what men and women were supposed to do, when marriage should happen, and how adulthood should look. Gen Z is more likely to question the script. But when you remove an old script, you need a new coordination system. Otherwise, everyone improvises, and improvisation can lead to confusion.
That confusion shows up in the situationship. A situationship is strategically interesting because it delays definition. It allows emotional and sometimes physical access without full commitment. For one player, it can preserve freedom. For another, it can create uncertainty and pain. The arrangement may feel efficient at first because it avoids pressure, but over time, the lack of rules becomes the rule.
In game theory terms, a situationship can be a low-commitment equilibrium. Neither person wants to demand too much and risk losing the connection, so both accept ambiguity. But if one person secretly wants commitment and the other prefers flexibility, the equilibrium is unstable. The trigger is usually unmet expectation. One person wants clarity, the other calls clarity pressure.
Dating apps and digital communication add another layer. Texting is a low-cost signal, which means it can be sent easily and interpreted too strongly. A good morning text might mean deep interest, or it might mean habit. A heart emoji might mean affection, or it might mean nothing. Because signals are cheap, people look for costly signals. Time, consistency, planning, public acknowledgement, sacrifice, and follow-through.
That is why consistency has become such a powerful romantic currency. A person who does what they say, communicates clearly, and remains steady over time is sending a costly signal. They are proving that their interest is not just verbal. For Gen Z, where words can be abundant and attention can be fragmented, consistent behavior becomes one of the strongest proofs of seriousness.
Now let's pause for a moment with a word from The New Sentinel. The New Sentinel is a podcast dedicated to in-depth discussions and deep dives across a wide range of topics. From the glitz and glamour of pop culture to the strategic intricacies of military operations, The New Sentinel covers it all with thoughtful episodes, detailed analysis, engaging storytelling, and conversations designed to help listeners understand the subject at a deeper level.
Whether you are a pop culture enthusiast, someone with a keen interest in global security, or simply a curious listener who enjoys sharp discussion, The New Sentinel has something for you. Tune in, view, subscribe, and comment to stay informed and entertained. And if you are an entrepreneur, The New Sentinel can help you advertise your product or service to an engaged audience. Bring your message to the conversation.
Back to the game of love. One implication of Gen Z's approach is that relationships may start slower, define themselves later, and face more negotiation. That can be frustrating, but it can also be more honest. Instead of assuming everyone wants the same life path, people have to ask, do you want marriage? Do you want children? What does partnership mean to you? How do you handle money? What does loyalty look like online and offline?
The upside is intentionality. If two Gen Z partners do commit, they may do so after more explicit conversation about boundaries, identity, and expectations. The downside is decision fatigue. If every norm has to be negotiated from scratch, dating can feel like a constant strategy meeting. Romance needs clarity, but it also needs ease. Too much analysis can turn intimacy into an audit.
That is the tension. Game theory helps us understand behavior, but love cannot survive as pure strategy. If every message is a move, every silence is a tactic, and every date is a negotiation, the relationship loses warmth. The best use of game theory is not to manipulate someone, it is to design better conditions for trust.
So what would a better strategy look like? First, make your signals clearer. If you want commitment, say so early enough that you do not become resentful later. If you are not ready, say that honestly rather than collecting emotional benefits without responsibility. In game theory, clarity reduces uncertainty. In love, clarity reduces unnecessary pain.
Second, reward cooperation. If someone communicates honestly, do not punish them for it. If someone is vulnerable, do not use that vulnerability as leverage. Relationships become safer when both people learn that honesty will not automatically create disadvantage. That is how you move from a defensive game to a cooperative game.
Third, distinguish between red flags and human flaws. A real red flag points to danger, disrespect, manipulation, or repeated harm. A human flaw may be awkwardness, nervousness, limited experience, or a mistake that can be repaired. If every imperfection is treated as a threat, nobody can pass the test. A healthy strategy includes discernment, not panic.
Fourth, understand that commitment is not the enemy of freedom. Bad commitment can destroy freedom, but good commitment can create a different kind of freedom. The freedom to be known, supported, and less alone. In a stable, cooperative game, you do not spend all your energy defending yourself. You can build.
That may be the central comparison with prior generations. Earlier models sometimes overvalued commitment and undervalued individual choice. The modern model can sometimes overvalue choice and undervalue commitment. The healthier path is not simply going backward or forward, it is combined.